This is a demonstration tutorial explaining the integration process of XPressEntry and software house CCure 9000 by Tyco security products. On my screen, I have the CCure application open on my left side. In the middle is the XPressEntry server application, and then on the very right is my handheld device. So you can kind of see all the different pieces. We have a monitoring station from CCure, and then we also have administration station. We're going to kind of go through the configuration process and how CCure 9000 communicates to XPressEntry. And then I will explain how XPressEntry itself also will relay data back to the handheld and will scan a few badges, send data back all the way back to CCure and see activities there. Before starting this installation process, please double check that you have the proper licensing part numbers from CCure and Teleris. These part numbers are very specific to have the integration sync data appropriately. For installation procedures, please look at our installation guide and integration guide with XPressEntry and the CCure 9000 system. There are a few steps that you will need to keep track of, such as making sure that you have a copy of the CCure client folders from your existing application that we will need to copy into XPressEntry. There are two installers for XPressEntry. You have the standard XPressEntry package installer, and there is a CCure 9000 specific data manager plugin installer. Please make sure that you have both of those installed. To start with the integration setup, we're going to first go to the CCure administration station, and we're going to set up new hardware. We're going to specifically set up a new cluster that's going to have multiple handheld associated to each reader that we're going to configure. So we're going to first go to hardware here. And as you can see, we already have a hardware folder for San Diego, and we already have a cluster, but we're going to create a new cluster to go through the process of how we would typically set the system up. Typically, we want to create a new cluster to separate our XPressEntry handhelds away from your other physical door readers. This is not required, but it does help to organize the hardware tree within your CCure system. To start, we're going to go to San Diego, right click, and let's create a new iStar cluster. I'm going to click new. And you can call this something pretty straightforward. A lot of times we'll just call it XPressEntry cluster or something to that extent. And the only pieces that we would need to do is just the name, and you can do a save and close. Next step is to right click the XPressEntry cluster. Let's create an iStar Ultra controller. The reason why we need an iStar Ultra controller is so that way we have a way to send activities back from each handheld device back to the CCure system. The iStar controller will not be a real physical controller, but we will use it as what we would call a virtual panel. So in this case, you're going to go ahead and create a new Ultra controller. We're going to just call it XPressEntry controller. Pretty straightforward. The name is not too relevant, but use whatever makes sense to you. For the MAC address, because we're not connecting to a real physical panel, all you need to do is add a MAC address that is valid. Typical valid MAC address is 12 characters. So in this case, I'm just going to add 6 more characters. For the password, the iStar Ultra panels do require a password, so by default, I will set a default password login. Because this panel isn't a real physical panel and we are using this as a virtual panel, this password will most likely never be used, but do keep track of what password you're entering here just in case. Go ahead and press OK. Let's go ahead and check enabled, and let's press save just to save the value of the controller. And for this, I'm just going to click yes. Do double check those settings to make sure that they apply to your system. Next step, let's go back into our XPressEntry controller. We're going to go to our boards. And let's go ahead and select the iStar Ultra ACM SE. Next step will be to click the configure for the controller. Let's click on edit. We are going to go to Wiegand, and we will need to create a reader for entry and exit per handheld. So for each handheld, you will require 2 readers if you're doing an entry-exit scenario. If you're doing mustering, you will only need 1. So in this case, we'll set up 1 for each. We will set up an entry reader and an exit reader. We can go ahead and edit the first one. And we can call this something very simple. So we can call it handheld entry 1. Click save and close. And you can actually edit the name from here also. Handheld exit 1. So now we have a reader for our handheld 1 that will both have an entry and exit. In this case, we can also do an exit/muster if you would like to use a reader for specifically both exit and mustering scenarios. With that, all you're going to do is press save, and we're going to save here. And that should create our new readers. So we have our 2 readers here, handheld entry and handheld exit/muster. The next step is to create a door. I'm going to right click the controller. I'm going to create a new iStar door. Click new. And so let's just call this handheld door 1. Our inbound read will be the entry reader. The outbound read will be the exit reader / muster reader. Go ahead and press save. The next step is to make sure that your readers are in the proper access level that you want to give access to people. In this case, in CCure, it would be associated to clearances. In XPressEntry, that would be our groups. Within the CCure system, we are going to go to clearances. I see it right here in the middle. So I'm going to click clearances. And we already have an employee clearance here. I'm going to open that up. We're going to go to our doors. I'm going to add a new door. And let's add our handheld door 1 that we just created. We'll set it to always. So now that this is in the list, we're going to save. So now anybody who is in the employees group will get granted access to that door reader. The next step is to go to our areas and zones. If you're not currently using any areas within CCure, we will need to add a few areas. If you already have existing areas, please apply the settings to your existing areas. In this case, we already have a San Diego on-site and off-site area. For this scenario, we will create new areas just to go through the process. If you have no areas within your system, go ahead and click new here on the left. For this area, we're just going to do, let's call it a test area. So we're going to do test area in. Go ahead and select the cluster that you are a part of. We're going to select the XPressEntry cluster that I created. And we're going to set this to a cross cluster area. You're going to first click save. Don't worry about the access in or access out first. We first need to create the second out area. Then press save. We'll wait for that to load real quick to verify. So to create new areas, go ahead and click on the new button on the top left here. And we're just going to call this test area in. For a cluster, go ahead and select the XPressEntry cluster. And you can leave the type as cluster area or cross cluster area. Settings may vary on what may be required depending on your scenario. Once you have this, go ahead and save this first. We will come back and edit the access in and access out. I'm going to save and close. Once this populates, we'll create new. There it is, test area in. Click new here. So now we're going to create test area out. Our cluster, go ahead and set the XPressEntry cluster. We're going to set the cluster area and we're going to set save. So now let's go back into test area in once out populates. Good. So back into test area in. So now we can click add here on the access in. For the door, we're going to select each handheld that we create. So in this case, handheld door 1. The reader will be the entry reader. And our enters from area will be the test area out. And as you can see, as I edit the top access in, the bottom access out will also add the opposite. And click save. And we're going to double check our out settings. This should also have been updated because we entered the in read and then we are associating the door. So as you can see here, this all looks good. Once your area is set up in CCure, there's one more part that we need to make a change in the CCure system. Let's go to our configuration here. In the configuration drop-down menu, we're going to go to our operators. Within operators, we're going to go to a list of operators that I have in my system. But in this case, what you will want the operator to do is be kind of the service account that will allow the XPressEntry application to log in into CCure and do the integration pull. A lot of times we do recommend to have a Windows service account that you will be using. This service account will be used to talk both to the SQL Server database and also be used here to talk to XPressEntry. In this case, if you are installing XPressEntry on the same machine as CCure, you can create a local system user that will be granted access. As you can see for the local system, the username just needs to be local system and the domain name needs to be CCure29. In my case, because this is my host name, but if your host name is different, please change your domain. If you are installing XPressEntry on a different machine, please first create a Windows domain account. Once you have that Windows domain account created, you can create a similar account similar to my Teleris test account here. Username is Teleris test. Domain is under my domain name of the host name. What this allows us to do is whichever service account is running the XPressEntry service will be granted access to talk to CCure itself. So do please make sure you read the installation guide to get this setup configured properly. I'm going to close this. And then we are going to use this Teleris test in my case. Once you have all these settings done, we can now go to the XPressEntry system. So we're going to go to the middle of my screen. I'm going to come to the tools at the top. I'm going to go to settings, data manager on the left. I'm going to start with enable data manager. For type, we're going to be choosing our CCure 9000. If you do not see the CCure 9000 option here, do double check the installation guide to make sure that the setup was appropriate with the data manager plugin. Once you select the CCure 9000, go to setup data manager. This is where it's going to be important to put in the server IP. For the server IP, this is where you will put in where the CCure system is hosted. So if you're installing XPressEntry on the same machine as CCure, you can leave the local host, but I would definitely recommend to use the host name here. In this case, my machine name is called CCure29.80.teleris.com. To go over some of the other settings outside of the server IP, for the CCure path, do just leave that as defaulted. That does not need to be changed. For the number of hours, journals, activities to grab, this is related to only if you're doing a manual occupancy sync, but because you're getting most likely live updates, you can leave that as 24 hours and that should be fine. For a typical setup, you do not need to modify any of these other settings, but if you do have any questions, please let us know. And we're just going to press OK. For sync options, we're going to click on the tab up here. Let's go ahead and select a few of these. We're going to pull activities, occupancy. If you want to pull software changes from CCure, click the pull data. If you want to push activities back to CCure, which we do in this case, go ahead and check the push, and then go ahead and enable our software events and message queue. This will allow us to pull data in live time on top of pulling data on a sync time basis. Let's press save again. And as you can see, we are adding our handlers. These handlers are what's going to be listening for different data changes within the CCure application. So the idea is that the majority of the data will synchronize over via software events. When you make a change within CCure, that change will come in live time, but we also will schedule syncs to run throughout the day to make sure that we have all the latest data from the CCure system. Now that we seem to be connected, we're going to run our full sync. Our full sync pulls everything, the entirety of all the data. I don't have too much data in this system, but let's go ahead and click the full sync now. This should be very quick. As you can see, we went through and we pulled all our data. A typical sync for about a 50,000 cardholder system could take anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes and even more. And this really does depend on how much data is in your system in CCure, and that varies based on number of cardholders, number of badges, photos, and access levels. For our sync timers, what we typically would recommend is for our full sync is to run this once a night. So typically I would put this to daily, and you can type in such as 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And as long as it says daily at 1 a.m. here, you click done. Although we're getting a lot of the updates daily over the software events in live time, as you saw earlier, running the full sync once a night is good to make sure that we have all the consolidated data in case that there's an instance where either the CCure services went down or XPressEntry services went down, and we can make sure to get all the latest changes. Partial sync will pull any data that is not cardholder related. And so partial sync would bring changes like changes to access groups, to readers, to doors, to areas, things like that. Depending on your system, you may or may not need to run this regularly, but if you do need to run this regularly, you can run this maybe every once an hour. Occupancy and activity syncs are not required necessarily for CCure because we are pulling most of the data in live time. Once we are synchronized, let's go click on our Add Edit Info. As you can see here, we now have a list of cardholders. For example, Maria Hammond, we have pulled her first name, her last name, her badge number here at the bottom, and then also her photo has synced over. Same with Sarah Marshall, Chris Mayfield, Joseph Morris. So these cardholders exist within the CCure application. So if we go to Personnel, switch this to Personnel, and search on all. You can see here the list here on the left within the CCure system now are matching on the right in the XPressEntry handheld. By this point, my handheld is online and it has also already pulled that data. If I do a search, you can see the list of cardholders here have also synced to the handheld device. So let's double check their access levels. If I go to permissions, if they had an access level, it would appear under this access group here. As you can see, I did not add any access groups yet. So in CCure, we're going to go to our clearances, verify that what clearances we have. We have our employee clearance. So let's go back to our personnel. Let's go edit Sarah Marshall. Let's go to our clearances. Let's add her to the employee's clearance. I'm going to go ahead and save and close. As you can see here on the right, after I've added her to the employees group, because the software events are enabled, we get the change almost instantaneously here. We can do the same for Maria Hammond. So if I go to Maria Hammond here, click add, select employee, and we will save, and almost instantaneously do we get that software event. So this is a really cool part of our CCure integration where we can get the live time events and data will change throughout the day, so that way you can give proper access or deny proper access to different cardholders as you make changes throughout the day. So I'm just going to go through and add everybody, give them an employee clearance. So let's do that. After checking our access groups here, we can go to our zones. Our zones are the equivalent of areas within CCure. And what we need to make sure is that the areas are assigned appropriately. For our test areas, test area in is going to be marked as a hazard area. So this is an area that we're going to keep track for occupancy. And test area out is going to be considered an outside or muster location. So we're going to press save there. Now we come into entry exit mode. We're going to switch our door on our handheld. As you can see, it says door test door currently. I'm going to press the menu in the top left. We're going to go set door, and then we're going to switch to our handheld door 1. This handheld door 1 is the door that we created within CCure. What this means is that when you present any badge to the handheld device, it is going to validate based on the access levels that were granted to handheld door 1. Now that we have handheld door 1 set, I'm going to scan our badge. As I scan Sarah Marshall, she updates into the server here. The server application gives you a track of all the occupancy of who's entering and exiting. So if I switch to exit mode by tapping on the screen of the device, it switches to exit mode, scan our badge again, which will now exit the location. On the screen at the bottom, if I move to the top, you can see her activities here as she's scanned in and out. So let's scan her back in. Now she's got entry granted. If I go over to monitoring station, we should see some of the activities that we've been scanning. So as you can see right here, right now on my timestamp of 8:12 a.m., she has been granted entry to the area in. The previous scan before, she was actually granted access to the test area out. As I scan people in and out, these activities are updating in live time. So as I present another badge, Maria Hammond has entered. You can see her entering on the occupancy here, and she has also updated here within the monitoring station. I'm going to present an unknown badge. So if an unknown badge comes in, you will actually see an unknown user. An unknown user does update here at the bottom that we stored the activity, and you will actually see a red activity here of an unknown user. So this is kind of how the devices will validate badges and actually send data to the CCure system in real time. As you can see, I have a bunch of unknown badges, and they all show invalid. And then we do the same thing for the exits again, with the 2 valid badges that we have. Our system is now back to our normal state of 0 occupancy. Let's say Maria is not an employee anymore and today is her last day, and we are going to disable her badge within the CCure system. I'm going to go to CCure, and let's go to her badge. We're going to select disabled, and we're going to save. Let's say she forgot something and she tried using her badge again after her badge was disabled. She's going to scan her badge on the device, and she's actually going to get a disabled scan. As you can see, once we make the change within the CCure and when the handheld is online, the handheld will get that update almost instantaneously, and she will get a denied access. And as you can see here, she did get denied at the door. As people are entering the facility, we will keep track of occupancy. And to mimic this, you can use a handheld device also to enter people into the facility. As we have our 2 occupants here, I can easily switch to our muster mode. Our muster mode has a missing list of our 2 individuals that we have scanned in. On our device, we can switch modes, and we can also go to muster mode. So our device will now switch to muster mode. It's going to keep track of we're actually going to switch this and muster people out to our test area out. And we're actually only going to keep track of occupancies between the test areas. These can be configured on your server settings. For missing, we have both Sarah and Maria here. And they have been entered into the building. They are accounted for as entering the office. When a mustering event goes off, if there's an evacuation of any type of fire drill, everybody would typically, in a common scenario, leave the building as fast as possible. As you exit the building, everybody goes out to a parking lot. Somebody, a guard or a mustering captain, whoever it may be, will take one of the handheld devices, and they can take the devices out and start scanning individuals one by one quickly. So if you scan people, you can scan a badge. As you can see, Sarah and Maria have now also entered the scan list, both on the handheld and the server. The idea is to muster people as quickly as possible, and as you see, as I scanned the two individuals, they move over from the missing list to the scan list, and so they are now accounted for. The goal is to get the missing list as close to 0 as possible, and that way you can make sure that everybody has been accounted for appropriately during an evacuation process. At the end of a mustering event, you can click Finish, and as you can see, it will generate a generic date timestamp event name. And it will give you the list of how many people are missing, how many people are scanned, and this is how the report will be generated. You can press OK here, and the missing and scan list will be reset. As you can see on the handheld also, both your missing and your scan list will be accounted for the same count. And this concludes our walkthrough of the integration with XPressEntry and Software House CCure 9000 by Tyco Security Products. If you have any questions or would like to learn more about our product, please contact our help desk at Teleris.com. Thank you for watching.